What is up, everybody? It is JT Sports. I'm back to you guys with another video. I want to discuss Cincinnati football. I believe that the Bearcats are the most interesting team heading into the upcoming college football season because a good amount of people in the college football world believe that this could be the first G5 program to ever make the college football playoffs. A large reason why college football fans out there want to expand the playoffs from 4 teams to 12 is to give G5 schools like Cincinnati a better chance to win a national championship. But also, some people out there believe that these G5 programs can compete with some of the blue bloods of college football, like at Alabama, Clemson, and Ohio State. Now, I don't want to be the person to come on here and say that G5 programs can't compete with Power 5 schools, because that's not the case. We've seen several instances of G5 programs upsetting Power 5 schools, okay? But I don't think expanding the playoffs to 12 teams is going to have the result that a lot of people are hoping for, okay? Because some people out there believe that G5 programs can't compete with the Alabamas of the world. And that's simply not true. You don't find a 2017 UCF or a Boise State walking around every single season. As a matter of fact, you probably may find 2 teams in a decade from the G5 that can legitimately have a competitive matchup with the Alabama or Ohio State. There's not a G5 program walking around every single year that can compete with some of the best of college football. But you do have some rare occurrences where you do find a Boise State or a UCF that seeks through the cracks and has a really good football team. I believe that Cincinnati may be the best G5 program heading into a season that I've seen on paper. When you look at Cincinnati last year in 2020, they went 9-1. They won their AAC, which I believe should be viewed upon as a power conference, but that's a discussion for another day. And on top of that, they have a pretty good coach in Lou Fickell, who's one of the better coaches in all of college football. Now, if we're going to have this discussion of Cincinnati making it into the college football, we have to knock down some barriers. Because everybody believes that there's a G5 school like a 2017 UCF that should be in the college football playoffs. And you have to take things into context. Because first, you got to ask yourself, do they have the schedule? Do they have the talent? Those are the 2 most important factors. Because most G5 schools, yeah, they may go 12-0. Yeah, they may be really good, but they don't really play a good schedule. That's a large reason why I don't believe having a 14 college football playoffs is holding back these G5 schools from making it in. I think the biggest reason why G5 programs don't get a legitimate look when it comes to the college football playoffs is because they don't play great schedules. Now, of course, I think a large reason for that is because you have these power programs scheduling games 10 and 20 years in advance, which makes no sense to me. But if a G5 wants to have a legitimate shot at making it into a 14 college football playoffs, you got to play a Power 5 schedule. And that's what Cincinnati has. Cincinnati plays Indiana and Notre Dame this upcoming season. Both games are going to be on the road. Now, Indiana and Notre Dame both should be pretty good teams this year. So when Cincinnati plays these 2 programs, they're going to be ranked, and they should be ranked pretty high. Most people view Indiana to be a top 15, top 20 program at worst heading into this year. And Notre Dame should probably be good, but they probably won't be as good as what they were last season when they went into the college football playoffs. But both of these 2 teams are really good. And Cincinnati is going to have a shot to beat these 2 teams. And if they're able to beat Indiana and Notre Dame on the road, that's definitely going to increase their chances of making it into the college football playoffs, where if they go undefeated, you can make a legitimate argument. Because oftentimes people try to make these arguments for why G5 schools should be in the college football playoffs, and oftentimes all people are going to ask them is going to say, okay, you're saying that they're good, but who have they played? And oftentimes they haven't played a tough schedule. So for Cincinnati, you beat Indiana on the road and you beat Notre Dame on the road in the same year. Oh yeah, you can definitely make an argument that they at least deserve some consideration. And on top of that, they play in the American Conference, which should be considered a power conference. I don't know why people are sleeping on the American, like the American hasn't had competitive games against some of the better programs in America. We saw Cincinnati compete with Georgia in this past year's New Year's Six Bowl games. Now, I understand Georgia had a couple of players out, but so did Cincinnati. Cincinnati had a couple of All-Americans on their squad. So, when you look at Cincinnati, they have the schedule, check. Do they have the talent? I believe they do. I believe that Cincinnati is one of the top 10 most talented teams in America heading into this upcoming year's college football season. First, you have a star quarterback in Desmond Ridder, who has a lot of NFL hype around his name. You guys know I'm a big fan of the NFL draft. I cover it, so of course, I'm always interested in seeing who's the next big-time quarterback prospect. A lot of people have their eyes on Desmond Ridder this year. Last year, he threw for 2,296 passing yards, 19 touchdowns, and 6 interceptions, while completing 66.2% of his passes. He also ran for 592 rushing yards and 5 rushing touchdowns. And as of right now, he currently leads college football quarterbacks in active wins with a 30-5 record. When I look at Desmond Ridder, I definitely see a very good quarterback. Now, he did start off last year slow, but he picked things up and he got better week after week. And on top of that, he has a really good group of wide receivers that he's throwing to. Okay, you have senior wide receiver Michael Young, who was all AAC last year, 29 receptions, 332 receiving yards, and 3 touchdowns. You have tight end Josh Weil, who had 28 receptions, 353 receiving yards, and 6 touchdowns. He may be one of the best tight ends in college football. You got Alex Pierce. Like, this is a really good supporting cast that Desmond Ridder is going to be throwing the football to. Now, they lost their leading rusher, and Dokes, who was all AAC. Okay, he was the best running back in the American Conference last season. He's going to be replaced by Jerome Ford. I don't think Cincinnati should have a drop-off in the halfback department because Jerome Ford only had 73 carries last year. And with only having less than 100 carries, he almost ran for 500 yards. He finished the year with 483 rushing yards while averaging 6.6 yards per attempt and 8 touchdowns. And remind you, he did this with less than 100 carries. Now, the offensive line isn't that big of a concern. You have a question when it comes to who's going to be your 2 offensive tackles, but the interior of their offensive line, guard, center, is really good. So offensively, I think the talent definitely is there. Now, I would like the offensive line to kind of not have questions at the offensive tackle, but overall, this is a really good offense. Oftentimes, this offense really was more of a ball control offense, more of a control time possession and keep the chains moving. But when you look at this defense, oh boy, Cincinnati may have one of the most talented defenses in all of college football. And that may come to a surprise to some of you guys because nobody really pays a lot of attention to G5 programs. Cincinnati last year, in my opinion, had the second best defense in college football. And this defense this year, I think can be even better than what it was previously in 2020. Now, they did lose 2 of the best safeties in that conference and also in college football. James Wiggins, James Forrest, both of those guys got drafted in this past year's NFL draft. But you still have one of the best secondaries in college football. You have one of the best corner duos in all of college football, not just G5, but in the whole entire college football landscape. You have Gardner, Kobe Bryant, not, the Kobe Bryant, but Kobe Bryant, the corner for Cincinnati. These guys are one of the best corner duos in all of college football. Combined, these guys have 7 total interceptions and 13 pass deflections. This is as good as it's going to get when it comes to having a good corner group. On top of that, you have a pretty solid pass rush. You got Myjai Sanders there. You got Beavers there. So you have a pretty good defensive line. You got a really good linebacking core. You have a really good front seven. And on top of that, you have two of the best corners in America. So the other question is going to be, how's that back end going to look? Now, Cincinnati has a really good team. A lot of Cincinnati Bearcats fans out there I've seen on social media consider this to be the most talented roster in Cincinnati history. And I agree. And I also may believe that this may be the most talented G5 roster that we've seen heading into the season in a very long time. There is NFL talent there. You have a star quarterback. You're really good up front. And that's the biggest thing when it comes to these G5 programs. For a G5 program to be able to compete with some of the better programs in college football, especially if you're trying to compete for blue blood like Clemson, Alabama, and Ohio State, you got to be able to win up front. You cannot get pushed around if you want to be able to compete with some of these schools. Because a big difference is because Alabama is trotting out 300-pound defensive linemen. Meanwhile, you have G5 programs who are trotting out, 270-pound, 280-pound defensive tackles. So if you're going to be able to compete with some of the Bamas of the world and the Oklahomas and whatnot, you got to be able to hold your own in the trenches. Because that's where most of these G5 programs fail. You have all this talent at the skill position, but you don't have the talent up front. And that's really what it comes down to in football. Football is won and lost in the trenches. So if Cincinnati is going to be able to compete, you're going to have to be good up front. And I believe that they're pretty good up front, but I don't know if they will be good enough to compete with a Oklahoma or an Ohio State. But I definitely believe that with the way the schedule lines up, Cincinnati definitely has a chance to make it into the college football playoffs if they do go undefeated and they do have a couple of other scenarios bounced their way. Because I don't think a 12-0 Cincinnati team is just going to outright claim a spot in the college football playoffs. I don't see it happening. Okay, even with wins on the road against Indiana and Notre Dame, I still feel like there's a couple of other things that have to play. I think one of the first scenarios is you need to have one SEC team in. Because oftentimes we see two SEC teams get in. You'll have an undefeated SEC team, and then you have a one-loss SEC team. So you'll probably need an SEC program to have two losses and not even be considered. So you'll probably only need to have one SEC school in this year. Then on top of that, you may need an Oklahoma to have one loss. Because then if you're 12-0 and you have a one-loss Oklahoma in, then you can probably go with the discussion of should Cincinnati be in against a one-loss Oklahoma or whatnot. And not just a one-loss Oklahoma, but if you have Cincinnati matched up against a one-loss SEC school that's getting consideration in, I think Cincinnati could win that argument. There's no way possible you can tell me a 12-0 Cincinnati team that beats Indiana on the road, beats Notre Dame on the road, and wins the AAC should not be included in the college football playoff discussion. I definitely feel like this is the best shot that the group of five is ever going to have of making it into this 14 college football playoffs. Now, when it gets expanded to 12 teams, that's a different argument, okay? But as of right now, in terms of 4 teams, Cincinnati probably is going to have the best shot that we may not ever see from a G5 program ever again. And on top of that, we're not going to find another G5 program that is as talented as what Cincinnati is. Now, I understand Louisiana is really good. You have the majority of their team coming back. But I definitely believe Cincinnati is the most talented G5 program in America. Not only are they the most talented G5 program in America, but I believe that Cincinnati may be the best G5 program that we will see this decade. Because G5 programs that have top 10 rosters don't come every year. They don't grow on trees. They occur once or twice a decade. So this is the G5's best shot of getting a team into the college football playoffs, or at least having an argument. So can Cincinnati make it into the college football playoffs? I believe they can. Will they? I don't know. I hope they can. I think they should be in around that 5-6 discussion. But I don't know if they can quite get the nod, because we know there's a little bit of SEC bias. And if you're going to tell me that there is no SEC bias, I would have to disagree with you, because when Florida lost to LSU, I thought they would have dropped out of the top 10. Florida lost to LSU last year, and they still had a chance to get it in. And if you guys have been subscribed to the channel for a while, you guys know I was livid with that. Like, there's just no way you could tell me that a Florida team that lost to LSU, who was unranked, had a terrible season, should have still been in the top 10. But yet, Florida still was in consideration. So, that just goes to show you how much the committee views these G5 programs. And even if Cincinnati goes 12-0, you're still going to need a team from the American that can still be ranked. Maybe that could be UCF or whatnot. Normally, there's a pretty good team in there. You have a couple. But you're going to have to need pretty much 2 more wins against top 25 teams to really have a strong argument. Okay, going 12-0 against wins with Indiana and Notre Dame, okay, you have a solid argument. But if you're able to get 2 more wins in there, and you have 4 wins against top 25 opponents, then you have a really strong argument. Because really, the committee, I don't really think they want to put a G5 program in there. Because at the end of the day, yes, it's all about getting the best teams in America in there. But at the same time, you also could be a little bit naive to think that this also isn't about money as well. Because the college football playoffs wants to have the biggest brands in there. Notre Dame is a big brand. Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State, some of the biggest money-making brands in this sport. So you put in a Cincinnati in there, okay, that kind of, I don't really know. And on top of that, you also have to prove that they're one of the best 4 teams in college football. So let me know what you guys think down in the comment section down below. Do you guys believe that the Cincinnati Bearcats can make it into the college football playoffs this season? Make sure that you guys like the video, subscribe to the channel for more NFL videos and content, and thanks for watching.